I'm really excited today. We are joined by Matt Reiter. Matt is a principal and managing partner at Capital Associates, a bipartisan government relations and policy analysis firm that's represented HBMA's interests in Washington for over 20 years. In this capacity, he serves as the HBMA's Director of Government Affairs. Matt has worked at Capital Associates since 2014, and he recently became a co-owner of the company. Matt represents the HBMA on legislative and regulatory health policy issues, including provider reimbursement, value-based payment systems, administrative simplification, the No Surprises Act, and efforts to reform the U.S. healthcare system. Matt sees his role as both a policy analyst and an advocate, and he helps the HBMA to understand relevant policy issues so they can make informed decisions about educating members, and when necessary, represents the HBMA in advocacy activities on those issues before Congress and federal agencies. So please, everybody, join me in welcoming Matt to today's HBMA Live. Matt, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure. And of course, just want to start out just by apologizing up front, because apparently the people above me are doing some construction in our office, and they just decide to start using their power tools. So if you hear any background noise, that's what that is. But yeah, no, thanks again. I'm really excited to be on this Facebook Live session to talk about what I'll be presenting on at the HBMA conference in September. For those of you who don't know me, I've been working with Bill Finnerfrock at Capital Associates since 2014. Actually, Bill's still here until Friday. That's Thursday's his last day. So that's when the title that was just announced will kick in. So, but Bill's still here. I've been working with him really closely on HBMA issues this whole time. Yes, taking over the business from him after he retires, and a really great opportunity over these last eight-ish years to be with him, to learn the ins and outs of not just health policy and how DC works from someone as seasoned and experienced as him, but also on HBMA's issues and really understanding HBMA members and their unique role on these policies and how we can provide the most value in terms of our advocacy to policymakers, given that unique perspective. As in, we really take a really big emphasis on, we place a big emphasis on the how for policies, not just the should you do this or should you not do that. It's really a big focus on, well, how are you going to do something that you want? Because that's really, what HBMA members are, that's their expertise at the end of the day. And it's an expertise that policymakers can't really get from anyone else. So really what I do in terms of my background is I I'm the one keeping track of the different issues here in Congress and the agencies, working with the HBMA Government Relations Committee to understand them, analyze them on behalf of how they would impact the industry, help provide education back to HBMA members on what's going on, and of course do advocacy with both Congress and federal agencies on these policies from our perspective.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you for that. So you mentioned the upcoming fall conference. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be speaking about.
Of course. Well, in some ways I know, but in a lot of ways I still don't know. I mean, that's why it's so important to be there, because what happens from the federal government can change so much in such a short period of time. It can have such a big impact that it's hard to really know until right before a conference or right before a presentation, what the final presentation is going to look like, because so much can change and things are as much gridlock as there's always change going on around here. So, and that's why it's so important to come to sessions like this to really learn about what's been going on here in Washington, both Congress, also the federal agencies. But I do know, high level, some of the topics that we're going to talk about. We're about to enter the very active regulatory season with Medicare regulations that impact payments to providers coming out pretty soon. The No Surprises Act being a really important topic, and we're expecting some regulations on that as well this week. And of course, there's going to be midterm elections coming up in November, which could really change the political dynamics of Washington in a really major way. So we'll be looking at everything from those different political topics we need to be thinking about, what the election could be doing, or how that could change, what goes on in Washington, but also some of these policy topics which will have come out pretty recently before the conference over the summer, so it really can help members understand what's been going on, especially with the regulatory front.
That's really helpful, and to have somebody with your knowledge of firsthand how those things are happening and how they can affect us, that's going to be some really helpful stuff for us. What are some of the key takeaways that you hope attendees get from your session?
I think there's a few key takeaways that people should really take away from the session. And that, I think, first and foremost, is really understanding how these policies will impact RCM companies, in the industry as a whole, and your clients. Because in so many ways, the way these policies get spoken about in the media or in other ways, or how they're covered, it's more high level, it's more maybe provider focused, it's not quite looking at things from the same perspective as HBMA members, specifically when it comes to operationalizing, as I was mentioning before, helping understand, again, it's implementing these policies at the end of the day. The No Surprises Act being an example, one of the issues that we're advocating on, without getting too in the weeds here, is the No Surprises Act requires health plans to provide the qualified payment amount, this median in-network rate, to providers, which is used for several different things. And one of those is how to appropriately bill the patient for their cost sharing. And the law doesn't specify, it says when that information needs to be transmitted, but it says nothing about how it needs to be transmitted. So what we found is, there's just health plans are largely doing things kind of one way, but not necessarily all. And because there's no standardized way, we can't necessarily rely on any specific, communication method. So that's, helping you to understand just the type of work that we're doing in that sense, but also really, as we talk about issues like the No Surprises Act, talking about them in a way that you're going to be the one really with the takeaways, not, that this is how this applies to me, or my company and my clients, not maybe in a way that you haven't really thought about before. And of course, also just thinking about, Washington is obviously subject to changes when there are elections. Right now, the Democrats control both chambers of Congress and the White House. That could potentially, and is, I think, likely to change after the November elections. Now, there's still plenty of time to go between, for campaigning between now and November. But we could very well see, at least one, maybe both branches of Congress chambers of Congress switch to Republican control. And then, really, what does that mean for the next 2 years from our federal government? With a divided government, with the president controlled by one party, the White House controlled by one party, and Congress controlled by a different party. So, obviously, talking through those different scenarios and what they could mean.
Wonderful. Well, I know I'm really excited to learn how some of these upcoming changes are going to have an effect on our company, and I'm excited to see everybody this fall at the live conference. So thank you so much, Matt, for spending a little bit of time with us today to give us a sneak peek into what we can expect from your session.
Of course, really looking forward to seeing everyone. I think it's going to be a really interesting and engaging presentation. And of course, there'll be a question and answer portion, as always, for me to take questions if anyone thinks of anything during that presentation they want to ask about. And also, I'll be there floating around and happy to talk with people in the wings of the halls if they have additional questions as well.
Wonderful. Awesome. Well, I may take you up on that. Thanks again, Matt. It was great to talk to you. Hope you have a great day.
Thanks so much. You too.
Thanks. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.